noise. In this element, we will be discussing noise hazards and its controls and how we can apply hierarchy of control at our workplaces to reduce the effect of noise at our workplaces, and how we can reduce and eliminate the effect of noise to the humans or to the workers working at our workplaces. So basically in this element, first of all, we will discuss different type of occupational services and occupational places where there will be high noise and the effect of noise will be massive due to the activities going on there and due to the environment. So first of all, we will discuss the construction workers. In construction site, at construction sites, as we have seen that on construction site, different activities are going on, multidisciplinary activities are going on. Some workers are doing welding activities, some are doing grinding activity, and even some are doing digging or excavation activity, and the noise generated from all these activities is massive. And just due to that, in construction sector there is high noise, and due to that you have seen that different noise hearing signages are also mostly displayed at construction sites. It is just because due to the massive noise being generated on those sites. The second one is uniform services. Uniform services are mostly referred to the traffic wardens standing at the signals, or other type of personnel which are using any type of guns and firing any type of bullets. So the noise generated from those bullets is massive. And if we move on to the traffic wardens, and the job of traffic warden is that much tough due to the vehicular noise on those areas. So due to that, the most of the noise generated from these activities is too much high. Third one is entertainment sector workers. Entertainment sector workers are mostly those which do their job in different clubs and even in music industry, and especially those people who are even DJs who play the music in different type of parties. So those type of personals or workers are mostly associated and are mostly exposed to the high noise. The fourth one is manufacturing sector workers. As we have seen that in industries there are too much machinery operations, and due to that machinery operation, high noises and generated, and the operators working with those machinery are exposed to the high noise. And the last one is call center staff. As we all know that in call center operation we have to deal with different type of massive frequency of calls in our work shifts, and due to that high noise is being generated on the floor and the offices, which can affect the personal health. So in call center there is also a chances of high noise. Moving on to the different type of effects generated from the noise. First we will discuss the physical effects, and we will discuss the psychological effects. In physical effect, the first one is temporary. What are the temporary effects? In temporary effects, there will be reduction in hearing senses. You will not be able to hear for some time. This is referred to as temporary hearing. And the second one is ringing in ears. This condition is basically called temporary tinnitus. This condition can also be made to be permanent if you are exposed to a high level of noises for the longer period, called temporary tinnitus. This condition can also is referred to as temporary hearing. And the second one is ringing in ears. This condition is basically called temporary tinnitus. This condition can also be made to be permanent if you are exposed to a high level of noises for the longer period of time. This condition can also become permanent. And the second one is noise induced hearing loss, which is a permanent threshold shift. So you will not be able to hear anything permanently. And in the last, there will be a condition in which you will not hear vehicles, warnings, or conversation between the peoples permanently. These all are the permanent effects of high noise and previously we discussed the temporary effects. Now we're going to discuss the psychological effects, which are two basically. The first one is stress and the second is concentration problem. So due to the high noise, obviously there will be too much stress on your brain if you are doing any kind of work and in the background there is too much high noise. So more the noise, the more stress will be induced on your brain and you will not be able to do your work properly and in a safe manner. The second one is concentration problem. Obviously if you are doing any kind of work activity and there are too much background noise, you cannot concentrate on your work, and what will happen, you will do your work in a unsafe manner and there will be a risk of incident or accident related to your work. Coming forward to the next slide, this is basically the anatomy of human ear. In this diagram, the different parts of human ear is shown. You don't have to memorize this, you can just have an overview of it, of different part. For example, auditory canal, eardrum. This will not come in the examination, so you can just overview it and you can see the different parts of the ear, but don't memorize it. Moving forward to some important terminologies which we need to understand. If we move on to the next slide, so we need to understand these terminologies. What are these terminologies? The first one is sound pressure. As we all know that sound travel in different type of waves. So the pressure generated by those waves is called sound pressure basically. It is expressed in decibels. Decibel is basically a unit of sound pressure. And moving forward, what is the frequency? What is the definition of frequency? Frequency is basically the number of pressure waves per second generated by that sound source. Then there are two types of weighting basically, A weighting and C weighting of sound. What are these two types of weighting? A weighting is basically sound pressure level corrected to match human hearing sensitivity. So this is a pressure level which is corrected to match human hearing sensitivity so that normal human can hear those sounds. And in C weighting, sound pressure level corrected for impulse noise. This means that, for example, if there is a high and there is too much noise level and sound level, what C weighting will do, in C weighting we will adjust that high noise level so that our normal human ear can also listen that voice and there will be much lesser consequences of that high noise for the human ear. Moving on to the next slide, these are decibel levels for different type of sounds. For example, if you see 0, faintest audible sound, it means that there is no noise. And from decibel 20 to 30, these type of noise measurement basically you will observe in quiet library. And the third one is 50 to 60 decibel. This is normally a sound level when we are doing conversation with each other. And the fourth one is 60 to 75 decibel. This is a noise level while we are listening to any kind of radio. And the fifth one or sixth one is 90 to 100 decibel. This is a sound level generated while we are doing any kind of drilling work with a power drill. So 90 to 100 decibel sound level is generated from that work. And in the last, this is a 140 decibel which is generated by jet aircraft taking off 25 meter away. That jet aircraft is 25 meter away and still the noise generated by that jet aircraft is 140 decibel. So these are basically different measurement levels related to the different activities and different things which are generating these sound levels. Basically there are two factors which determine the degree of harm from the noise. What are those two factors? The first one is noise level, the second one is duration of exposure. If we will just focus on the noise level, the greater the noise, the greater the effect it will cause to the one who is hearing it. And the same thing is for the duration of exposure. The greater the duration of exposure, for example, if a person A is hearing one high noise for like the duration of 1 hour, and a person B is hearing the same that high noise for the duration of 2 hours. So obviously the effect of noise for the person B who is listening that the noise for the duration of 2 hours is more as compared to the person A. So basically it is a directly proportional thing, that if noise level is high, the effect of noise will be more, and if the duration of noise level is more, the effect of that noise will be more consequently too. Personal noise exposures. Basically, the personal noise exposure is calculated by your daily personal noise exposure, which is calculated for 8 hours. This is basically a average calculated value for 8 hours for the daily personal noise exposure. And the worker exposure to single peaks of exposure is also measured. This is called the peak sound pressure. Peak sound pressure basically is generated from the impulse noises. What are the impulse noises? For example, if I fire a bullet from a gun, and the noise generated from this bullet is called the impulse noise. There are some national laws around the world related to the noise. For example, in the UK, there is a national law related to the noise, which is a control of noise at work regulation 2005, and in Europe there are some other laws of which European countries followed related to the noise. Referring to the noise, there are different noise action values. We call these action values as lower exposure action values and upper exposure action values, and then there come the limit values. Now we will be discussing in detail the lower exposure action values, upper exposure action values, and limit values. So first we will discuss the LEV, which is the lower exposure values. This is basically a daily or weekly personal noise exposure of 80 decibel and a peak sound pressure of 135 decibel for impulse noise. And for the upper exposure action values, a daily or weekly personal noise exposure of 85 decibel and a peak sound pressure of 137 decibel for impulse noise. Now there comes the limit values. A daily or weekly personal noise exposure of 87 decibel and a peak sound pressure of 140 decibel for impulse noise. Now we will discuss in detail that each action values and what type of action we need to take for each type of action values in our next slide. So basically, for lower exposure action values, which is 80 decibel, we have to carry out noise assessment. We need to give information, instruction, and training to people, and also make hearing protection available. If the noise exposure of 8 hours time weighted average at our workplace is 80 decibel. Moving off forwards toward the upper exposure action value, which is 85 decibel. In this scenario, we again have to carry out a noise assessment, and we have to reduce noise exposure by engineering means LARP. LARP means as low as reasonably practicable. For example, if noise is still above 85 decibel, we need to give mandatory hearing protection zone. We need to give information, instruction, and training to people with regards to the noise. We need to provide them hearing protection, which is earplugs or earmuffs, and we need to conduct health surveillance too. Health surveillance is basically the monitoring of health fitness of our workers at the workplace which are exposed to the high noise levels. And the last one is exposure limit value, which is 87 decibel. If the noise level reaches 87 decibel, we have to immediately prevent the exposure and reduce it below the limit value. The limit value is 85 decibel, which we discussed earlier. The ELV is an absolute ceiling above which exposure must not go. This line means that the personal exposure of any kind or of any worker at a workplace should not exceed 87 decibel. This is basically a diagram of how noise travels from source to receiver. For applying the control measures and to reduce the noise exposure levels at our workplaces, we need to understand this diagram. As I told you earlier that noise travels in waves. So if we need to reduce the effect of noise, we need to distort or we need to limit that path of the noise which is carrying the noise towards its receiver. If we just distort that path, if we will just cut that path, and if we will provide any kind of resistance to that path, so we can easily achieve our control measures of reducing the noise effect. So now we will be discussing the basic control measures of noise which we can apply to reduce the noise effects at our workplaces. What we can do is we can reduce noise at source. So how we can reduce noise at source, which is generating the noise? First thing we can do is we can eliminate that source. Elimination means that we will not use that source, we will use any kind of other source, and we will stop doing that activity which we are doing. And the second thing is substitute. We can replace that source with any kind of other source which will produce less noise. And in the third, we can modify the process. For example, if we are doing one activity in one specific way which is generating some noise, we can approach different way of doing that activity which will produce less noise. And fourth one is maintenance. Most oftenly, sometimes the machinery when require maintenance, they produce too much noise, and after doing the maintenance the noise level get less and we achieve the less noise. And the last one is damping and then silencing. Damping is basically providing damping mats for the machinery which is producing noise. For example, if a machinery is placed on the damping mats, that damping mats will absorb all the noise generated from that machinery. And in the last, we can also provide silencer. As you can already heard the word silencer, that if we connect that silencer to any kind of machinery which is producing high noise, that silencer will just silence that noise. And second thing what we can do is we can interrupt the pathway, as I have told you by in that the slide of that diagram, that we can interrupt the pathway by providing insulation. Insulation is a very bad conductor of basically noise. And second thing what we can do is we can isolate. We can just isolate the receiver from the source. We can maintain a long distance between them, and this will help in reducing the noise. And the third one is absorption. We can provide different type of absorption and damping mats. As I have discussed earlier, there are specific type of mats and specific type of material which absorb noise. The last one is we can protect the receiver. If we cannot reduce noise at source, and even we cannot even interrupt the pathway, so the last option left for us is to protect the receiver. How we can protect the receiver? We can provide acoustic haven across the machinery and across the receiver. Acoustic haven basically are the enclosed design of the workplace of the location, which can just contain the noise at one location. It will not allow the noise to travel to any other location. And the second thing is we can provide hearing protection, which is the only option left for us, which is ear muffs and ear plugs. There are basically two types of hearing protection. The first one is ear defenders and the second one is ear plugs. Ear defenders are also called ear muffs. Ear muffs are basically large in their size, and earplugs are basically small rubber types bullets, and you can just plug them in your ears. So these are two types of protection which we can use at our workplaces for the hearing protection. And ear defenders have their own limitation and advantages. Earplugs also have their own limitation and advantages. Now we will discuss those limitation and advantages. So first we will discuss the advantages and limitation of ear defenders. They are easy to supervise and enforce use as they are visible. For example, if one worker is wearing ear defenders, and if I am passing by from that worker, I can see from the even from the longer distance I can see that he is wearing that. So in case of ear plugs, we cannot see because they are too much small in size. They cannot be seen from the longer distance. So the second advantage of ear defenders are there are less chances of ear infections, because ear muffs are specifically for different people, and they are allotted to different people, they are issued to different people, and that for that reason, as they are also not disposable, for that reason there are less chances of ear infections. And one of the main causes of they prevent ear infection is that if you have seen any kind of earplugs are basically plugs which plugged into the inner depth of your ears, and earmuffs just cover your ears from the outer side. So that is also the main reason for the earmuffs, to prevent the ear infections. The third advantage of earmuffs is higher level of protection possible through all sound frequencies. Bone transmission is reduced. So the third advantage of ear defenders, it provide high level of protection as compared to the ear plugs because of its size and its covering and its fitting. And the fourth advantage of ear muffs is it can be integrated with other PPs. For example, safety helmets. You can wear ear defenders with your safety helmets and with your safety goggles also. Ear defenders are reusable, unlike the ear plugs, which are basically for one time use, and after using one time you have to dispose them. So what are the limitations of ear defender? Ear defenders are most of the time uncomfortable because of their size, and we cannot wear for it long time, especially in the summer season because of the high heat, high temperature. Second limitation is it must be routinely inspected, cleaned and maintained, which is most of the time is a challenge. The third limitation is its efficiency may be reduced by long hair and if you are wearing spectacle or earring. So if you are wearing any kind of spectacle or earring and if you have long hair, its efficiency may be reduced due to these factors. Earmuffs are incompatible with some other items on. As in the previous point we have discussed that earmuffs are sometimes incompatible with other items. So if they are incompatible, their efficiency will be reduced. And the next thing is that they need dedicated storage facility. Earmuffs are, as we have discussed, they are bigger in size, so that's why they need dedicated storage facility as compared to the earplugs, which are smaller in size. We can just put them in our pocket in any kind of packet, but in case of earmuffs they need specific storage area. Now we will discuss the earplugs advantages and limitation. Earplugs are cheap, and as we have discussed earlier that these are disposable, these are often more comfortable to wear because of their size, and they do not interfere with any other items on. Why? Because they are smaller in size. What are their limitations? They are difficult to see when fitted, so supervision and enforcement is difficult. It is mostly a challenging situation, especially for the health and safety professionals, because if they are present at site and they are doing any kind of supervision of their workers, so it is difficult to see the earplugs if anyone is wearing that or not. We cannot judge by seeing them. We have to ask them and we have to physically see that if they are wearing or not by going closer to them and by asking them to show it. So the second limitation is risk of infection. For example, if one worker is wearing earplugs and another worker came and he also demanded that he need to wear the earplugs of that worker, the second worker, so obviously there is a chances of risk infection, and especially in today's time when there is too much infectious virus there are in the our world. For example, COVID, we avoid using these type of PPs which can cross contaminate. Whichever hearing protection you are wearing, the arrangement should be made for giving information, instruction and training to your employees with regards to those hearing protection. You need to provide dedicated safe storage for that hearing protection, and we need to maintain and clean those hearing protection so that they are in a good condition, good working condition. And last thing is that we need to replace them when they are damaged. Coming forward towards the attenuation. Attenuation is basically the characteristic of the hearing protection for stopping the sound energies and sound waves and interrupting the sound energy and sound waves. Earmuffs have different types of attenuation and earplugs have different type of attenuation. If you buy those earplugs and earmuffs, on the data sheet the attenuation value will be written. For example, on earplugs data sheet it will be written that it will reduce 15 decibels. So if you are wearing earplugs and the noise level in that area is 85 decibels, so after wearing the earplugs it will come to the 70 decibels. So basically this characteristic is called attenuation. Ear defenders and earmuffs gives higher attenuation than earplugs This thing is already we discussed because of their design and because of their big insides and because of their durability and fitness. Now we will be discussing the role of health surveillance. So basically, audiometry allows identification of worker with pre-existing hearing damage and new hearing damage. And if we are conducting health surveillance at our workplace, we will be able to know that who are those workers which are having pre-existing hearing damage and who are those workers which are having new hearing damage. For example, I hired in my company 80 workers, and after doing health surveillance I got to know that 40 workers are having pre-existing hearing damage and 40 workers are having new hearing damage. So I need to focus on that other 40 workers which have new hearing damage after they joined my company. So I will need to give focus to them and provide control measures appropriate and conduct proper risk assessment at our workplace to reduce the noise exposure level so that no more new employees